Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us for this Sunday's show. On yesterday's satellite imagery, we had another batch of showers here that was approaching and moving in with some isolated thunderstorms across the southeast coast. Band of moisture up here over the eastern interior, actually extending from the Brooks Range all the way down to the Kenai Peninsula, with rain and snow up through the northern areas and rain down to the south, gradually moving eastward and out along the west coast. Another band of moisture kind of sliding east-southeastward, bringing some areas of light rain from the Seward Peninsula down into the southwest interior areas, and then another big area of clouds out to the west that today moved rapidly across the Bering Sea. And the first batch that came in yesterday up in this area, bringing rain to the Tanana Valley, and then rain and snow up into the Brooks Range areas. Basically dry along the Arctic coast today, but there was some rain and snow and fog there at Barrow during the afternoon hours, and a lot of moisture spreading in. This mostly just high cirrus to start with here, coming across the Alaska Range there. Most of the rain back along the range and on out to the west, actually extending down across the Bering Sea all the way into the west central Aleutian areas, with clear skies, or mostly clear skies at least to start with, before the higher clouds moved in. Prince William Sound, the North Gulf Coast areas up into the upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country. Not a bad day. A lot less in the way of showers over the Panhandle, with some clearing periods there, allowing net to rise up to 64 degrees. Still some isolated showers along the southeast coast today, but the sunshine over the southeast interior and the rain moving into the central interior, with kind of catching up to this other band of moisture that moved up to the northeast there. A weak low up along the Arctic coast. Again, some of that circulating moisture into the central areas there. Barrow with the rain and snow this afternoon, and areas of fog. Pretty gusty winds, over 50 miles an hour at St. George with this system as it moved up to the southwest coast. 35 to 45 mile per hour winds along the coast there, with Cape Newnham seeing gusts to about 55 miles per hour this afternoon. So quite a rain and wind producer, with gale warnings out across much of the Bering Sea today, and that'll continue into tonight. Again, rain all the way up to the Alaska Range, starting to spread into the Susitna Valley, or it has spread into the Susitna Valley this afternoon. And for tonight, that'll spread over south central Alaska, with rain developing along the North Gulf Coast and the Prince William Sound. It'll be a dry night with light winds here across the Panhandle. Look for some scattered showers over the southeast interior areas along the eastern Alaska Range, but this rain batch will push southeastward. Rain for Kodiak Island, the Alaska Peninsula, and Bristol Bay, scattering out to some showers back along the Yukon and Kuskokwim River Delta areas. Up to the north, that'll mix in with rain or snow depending on your elevation here over the Koyukuk and upper Yukon valleys, of course the Brooks Range, and the eastern Arctic coast and North Slope areas. It remains dry back to the northwest there, and pretty gusty winds here across the Bering Sea areas, but beginning to diminish. Still some gale warnings out tonight here along the southwest coast and Bristol Bay. Also gale warnings out for Cook Inlet for tonight. Southwest winds kicking up to 35 knots, and then pretty windy conditions continue there at Kodiak Island with the rain. Look for showers and lighter winds up across the St. Lawrence Island area. Not really much back out to the west here, just higher pressure, pretty slight gradient. So winds will be diminishing over the central and western Aleutian areas. And then for tomorrow, most of that moisture that comes across tonight, the Bristol Bay area and Kodiak Island, that shifts into the Gulf of Alaska. So that'll begin to increase the clouds and the chance of showers along the southeast coast during the day tomorrow, but most of this moisture should slip on down to the southeast with the upper level wind flow. Got low pressure over the northeast interior areas with rain pretty likely here from the Brooks Range mixed with snow there, and then rain back across the Tanana Valley into the Kuskokwim Valley. Rain in the morning here for south central Alaska, turning to numerous showers in the afternoon with cloudy skies, so a wet day coming up here for the North Gulf Coast, southern Alaska. Rain throughout much of the day, again over the central interior areas in the Tanana Valley back to the southwest. Lots of showers here along the southwest coast and showers along the Alaska Peninsula all the way out to the eastern Aleutians, and then some lingering showers, but starting to scatter out there over the eastern Bering Sea and along the southwest coast. Look for some partly sunny conditions from Norton Sound, the Seward Peninsula up over the northeast interior with a drier northeasterly flow up in this area. Could be some patchy fog along the eastern Arctic coastal areas there, but pretty good northwest winds across Kodiak Island with possible gusts to 45 miles per hour there and along the Alaska Peninsula areas. Lighter winds along the Aleutians out to the west, high pressure near or just southwest of Adak, making for light wind conditions with maybe some partial clearing once again. Basically dry out over the Bering Sea. And taking a look at the Tuesday forecast, again, low pressure right over the Kenai Peninsula. So lots of showers, lots of clouds over south central Alaska. Showers, mostly cloudy with showers, the Copper River Basin. And partly sunny, scattered showers for the southeast coast here. But as this trough approaches the coastline, those southeast winds will pick up to about 25 knots along the outer coastline there during the afternoon on Tuesday. Otherwise, lighter winds over the inside waters. And pretty brisk winds here. Brisk wind advisories in the forecast for all of the Arctic coast right down into the Chukchi Sea. Northeast winds 25 to 30 knots, and look for some rain or snow or just snow at the across the Brooks Range. Just snow. Could be still a mixture here over the eastern Arctic coast and down into the northern portions of the upper Yukon Valley areas, maybe the Koyukuk Valley. But lots of showers back here to the west, diminishing as you head out toward the coastline there, but kind of a area of moisture sliding into the Yukon Delta, or the Kuskokwim Delta there for some showers, just scattered showers in the forecast, scattered showers also for the Alaska Peninsula, and winds diminishing here across Kodiak Island, but staying pretty breezy across the Alaska Peninsula area. Light winds over Cook Inlet, Prince William Sound looking pretty light, and again, light winds here over the Aleutians. Look for some low clouds, fog and drizzle there spreading into Adak and extending back out towards Shemya, probably some IFR for the flying conditions in that area. Temperatures this afternoon, mostly in the mid-50s along the southeast coast, the exception being Annette that rose to 63 today. That was a warm spot in the state. Otherwise, Juneau had 55. Same thing at Yakutat, 57 at Cordova with Valdez at 52. Lower to mid-50s here across south central Alaska, Talkeetna at 46, 52 degrees at Gulkana, and 53 at Northway, where there's a little more sun. But the clouds and rain there, Fairbanks just 43, but Tanana up to 47. 43 also there at Fort Yukon and Arctic Village, 32 degrees this afternoon. Anatuvik at 36. The Arctic coast mostly in the mid to upper 30s here along the coast there. Both Point Lay and Nuiqsut hit 40 degrees this afternoon. Otherwise, mid-40s across the Seward Peninsula there with Nome at 46. Kotzebue had 42 today, and down to the south and southwest, McGrath there at 49. 46 at Sleepmute and Bethel with gusty winds and rain, 47 degrees. But Macoriac up to 52. 50 degrees at St. Paul, and mostly in the lower to mid-50s here for the Alaska Peninsula. Mid to upper 50s, 57 at Adak. And for the lows tonight, 40s along the southeast coast and mid to upper 40s here to near 50 along the southwest coastal areas. Otherwise, upper 20s to lower 30s across the north slope in the Brooks Range area, right out to the Arctic coast there, and 30s here over the southeast interior. Highs for tomorrow, mid to upper 50s for the Panhandle in that area. Otherwise, about the same. Upper 40s to mid-50s here, south central Alaska and the North Gulf Coast. Milder down toward Bristol Bay, looking at mid-50s there. 40s through the central interior and the Tanana Valley. Lower to mid 30s there from the Brooks Range, North Slope out to the Arctic coast, all in the 30s, 40s over the northwest interior and the Seward Peninsula, and temperatures rising 55 to 60 here out over the Aleutians. For the flying weather, look for IFR, Prince William Sound, right along the North Gulf Coast, extending in over the northern Panhandle. Marginal VFR south of that, and the southern southeast coast looking for some VFR conditions. Marginal VFR over the Kenai Peninsula areas, with marginal VFR up over the eastern interior, becoming VFR over the north central areas back out to the Seward Peninsula. IFR possible here, eastern and central Arctic coastal areas, and then IFR right along the southwest coast here down to the Alaska Peninsula, back out to the Pribilofs, and along and just north of the Aleutians. Taking a look at passes, Anaktuvuk looks to be marginal at times tomorrow, as does Adigan. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, looks marginal VFR with IFR on both western entrances there. Same forecast for rainy, lowest conditions on the west side. Probably IFR at times for windy tomorrow. Isabel, same forecast. Mentasta, though, could be VFR throughout the day. Tanita, though, looks marginal, and Portage occasionally IFR. Chilkoot and White starting out marginal and deteriorating into IFR conditions into the afternoon. Freezing levels, not much of a gradient here, about 4,000 feet along the southeast coast, and then dropping to 2,000 feet up over the Brooks Range area. But out to the west, different story, 2,000 feet there across the Chukchi Sea, just about into the Bering Strait, and then much warmer conditions all the way up to 16,000 feet here over the west central Aleutians. That's about as high as the freezing levels get out in that area. Icing tomorrow here from the southwest coast, right along the Kuskokwim River, up to the northeast into the interior. Light to isolated moderate rime above 4,000 feet or so, and another batch here off the southeast coast. But again, most of this will be slipping southeastward, but it'll extend up over the northern Panhandle and the eastern North Gulf Coast, probably staying to the east of Cordova, but right into over Yakutat. Winds aloft, two jet streams, the Arctic jet here, northwesterlies up to about 90 knots, right on down toward the Queen Charlottes, and then the stronger Pacific jet right across the Bering Sea, 100 to 120 knots, with a big wind max now shifting south of Kodiak Island, supporting those stronger surface winds in that area of 9,000 feet, 35 to 45 knots here, Bristol Bay, the Alaska Peninsula, and Kodiak Island, with southerlies at about 15 to 20 knots across the Panhandle. In the interior, we've got westerlies on the south side of this low center, right around the Alaska Range up in across the White Mountains, and then northeasterlies up along the Arctic coast in the 20 to 25 knot range. And 30 knot winds there for the Fox Islands, but notably lighter winds as you head west toward the Aleutians. That same pattern also exists at 3,000 feet. Pretty westerly here across the Bering Sea. 30 to 40 knots in towards Bristol Bay, and that extends across into the south of Kodiak Island. About 25 knots there across the Barren Islands. Low pressure up over the interior. 10 to 20 knot winds circulating around that. Up on the Arctic coast, northeasterlies 20 to 25 knots, and pretty light winds here over the southeast coast there, with the low center back to the west over the Gulf of Alaska. Turbulence-wise, along the central Alaska Range up into the White Mountain areas, occasional light to isolated moderate chop there. Same type of turbulence below about 4,000 feet for the Arctic coast, down into the western Brooks Range area, Noatak Valley and the northwest coast. Pretty smooth here to the south, and then the heavier stuff along the Kodiak Island area, of course the Aleutian Range, Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay, back along and up toward Nunivak Island, but pretty smooth here for just about all of the Aleutian chain. No significant turbulence expected in that area. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and today I'm privileged to introduce Dr. Uccellini, the Director of the United States National Weather Service. Welcome back to Alaska, sir.
Thank you, Dave. Glad to be here.
Thanks. Prior to being the leader of the National Weather Service, your work included an extensive look at snowstorms across the northeastern United States. These are the types of storms that can bring some of the country's largest cities to its knees. Tell me a little bit about your fascination with snow.
Well, as far back as I can remember, I've always been interested in weather, growing up as a kid on Long Island, New York, and was particularly fascinated by snowstorms. why they occurred. The distribution of snow was very varied across the entire region. The rain-snow line, all those things fascinated me right from the get-go. And I was interested in knowing how they worked, how the forecast worked, or more often than not, didn't work one way or the other. And that drove me, that interest continued to build and drove me through high school right into college, wanting to be a meteorologist.
Oh, okay, that's a fascinating story, and I think every meteorologist has a weather story like that in some way.
Right.
Due to Alaska's size and proximity to the North Pole, sometimes it's difficult to detect and analyze the weather patterns over Alaska. What's the National Weather Service doing to improve that weather detection?
Well, observations in this type of environment is a big challenge, whether it's from space or from what we call in situ observations from the ground or within the systems. Clearly, satellites have been playing an increasing role in providing the big picture, not only from a visual sense in what you see is occurring, but also from providing the data for numerical models that then are used to actually predict the weather. Alaska is actually pretty well positioned with respect to polar orbiting satellites, since you get a faster return of those satellites over your particular area. And in fact, the polar satellite system is the backbone for the observations that we use in our models, especially our global models, and they're particularly important for observing weather features that affect Alaska.
Alaskans live and die by the weather every day, and one of the strategic goals of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the National Weather Service is to develop a more weather-ready nation. What does it mean for Alaskans to be weather-ready?
Well, the strategic outcome is based on people being ready, responsive, and therefore resilient to the increasing threats to extreme weather events. Those threats are related to not only the nature of the events, but the fact that we're becoming more vulnerable to them as we have more people, more infrastructure that could be affected by these events. So we have to ensure that the observations we make for situational awareness, the forecasts we make for people to take the proper responses, are connected to people's actions, the response to these events, so that they will be more resilient to what's facing them. You know, there are examples with respect to hurricanes. More people living along the coastline takes longer to evacuate. We have to make better forecasts with longer lead times, but we also have to communicate the threat so people will actually take action to avoid those storms. Up here you have, as in other parts of the United States, an increasing threat related to fire. As there are more people living in fire-prone areas, we have to ensure that our forecasts are good, that we don't have false alarms that make people not react to the forecast when in fact they should. But we also have to be able to communicate the threat and make sure that we're working with the partners in the emergency management community so that communities and right down to individuals will actually take the proper responses in the face of these events. So that's the strategic goal. There are a lot of challenges for us in terms of improving forecasts, but also improving our communication skills and linking with the emergency management communities that are actually out there trying to protect lives and mitigate property loss.
So a huge partnership effort going forward.
That's one of the important keys for the success of meeting the strategic goal.
Okay. Well, one of the things you're talking about was understanding the weather information we're getting back from the computers, weather modeling, and you did a lot of work with that in some of your prior positions with the Environmental Prediction Center there, the National Center for Environmental Prediction. What can you tell us about recent improvements in that weather modeling? And you were using the polar orbiters as kind of a source of information that started that process.
Well, you know, first of all, we have to recognize that everything you see, you read and hear about weather, climate, or ocean forecasts are all driven by numerical models. Now, it really has been the revolution in our forecast process in the last part of the 20th century. The success of that numerical enterprise is based on three factors: big computers, global data, not just local data, but you have to have a global data set. And then the models themselves, the science that's behind the models and in running the models in an operational mode. So we're working to improve all three of those components. We upgraded our computers last year. We're going through another upgrade even as I speak. We'll be upgrading from 200 trillion calculations per second to 700 trillion calculations per second by January of 2015. This increase in the computer will allow us to run what we call Earth system models. It's not just the atmosphere, it's the atmosphere, ocean, ice, which is obviously very important up here, and land models that are all coupled together at higher resolution. So you need the big computers, you need the science that allows us to run these models and run them in a parallel mode, and that they're coupled so that the ocean effects could affect the atmosphere and vice versa, as an example. And then the global observations are absolutely critical, and over the last 20, 30 years they've become more dependent upon the satellite systems, and especially the polar orbiting satellites, which help drive the observations needed for those models, whether they be atmospheric observations, land, ice observations. We're deriving more and more of that from satellites now that feed into these models and produce forecasts with extended lead times. Now out, for extreme events especially, we're seeing much improved forecast out in the 4, 5, 6, 7, and even 8-day range, which gets us back to Weather Ready Nation, because if you're going to get ready for a storm event, you want those consistent forecasts approaching that event from day 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, so you can take the actions several days in advance that can help mitigate the property loss and protect your livelihood.
Okay, all part of the mission of protecting life and property. Dr. Uccellini, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and speaking to Alaskans and sharing how the National Weather Service is working for Alaska and the nation. Wish you safe travels around the 49th. Enjoy your time here, sir. And for Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider.
Southwest winds at 15 knots for the south coast, and southerlies 10 to 15 knots there for the north coast. Light southerlies to southeasterlies here for the central and southern inside water areas. Lynn Canal, northern Lynn Canal, south winds increasing to 20 knots with seas building to 4 feet. And for Tuesday's outlook, small craft advisories as a trough approaches the coastline. 20 to 25 knots here from the south on the southern coast, and then northern areas, southeasterlies 20 to 25 knots. And southeast 15 knots for Clarence Strait, southerlies at about 15 here through the central inside waters, Lynn Canal south at 15. For Prince William Sound, southeast winds at about 10 tomorrow. Cook Inlet, after the gale warnings that are out tonight, winds will be coming down tomorrow to 20 to 25 knots, but small craft advisories lasting through the afternoon for southern Cook Inlet down in across Kamishak Bay and Shelikof Strait areas. Westerlies 30 knots there for the east side of Kodiak Island, southwest 20 to 25 knots for the Barren Islands and western North Gulf Coast. And then for Wednesday, those winds become easterly at about 20 knots there for Prince William Sound. Same thing here for the North Gulf Coast with seas up to about 5 feet. And then westerly winds here for the Barren Islands, but up to 25 knots there. So small craft advisories here around most of Kodiak Island, westerlies at 15, and lighter winds for Cook Inlet. Northern Cook Inlet is light variable winds with seas at 2 feet or less. And for Bristol Bay tomorrow, and for the Alaska Peninsula and the waters southwest of Kodiak Island, all westerly at 30 knots with seas running 11 to 14 feet. And the outlook for Tuesday, those winds stay westerly, but they come down a little. Still looking at small craft advisories here for Bristol Bay and from Sitkinak to about Chignik there, and then a little bit lighter at about 20 knots there for the southern Alaska Peninsula. Out over the Aleutians, we've got small craft advisories for the Fox Islands tomorrow. Westerlies 25 to 30 knots, but west of Nikolsky, all southwest and diminishing as you head out to the west here, just southwesterlies at 15 for the western and central Aleutians. Then for the Tuesday outlook, pretty light westerly winds here, 10 to 15 knots over the central and western Aleutians, with westerlies 10 to 15 knots here from the central Aleutians, picking up a little bit to about 20 there, with seas 7 to 8 feet across the Fox Islands. And for the southwest coast, small craft advisories, westerly winds 25 to 30 knots, strongest winds, highest seas here south of Nunivak Island. For the St. Lawrence Island area, northeast, 20 knots with 10-foot seas, and westerlies at 25 knots to the Pribilof Islands, and pretty brisk westerlies there for the northern Bering Sea. And for Tuesday, small craft advisory south of Nunivak Island, northwest 20 to the north, and for the St. Lawrence Island area, north 20 knots, seas 6 feet, westerlies coming down to 20 knots with 8-foot seas. So still a small craft advisory there for the Pribilof Islands. And for the Arctic coast tomorrow on the east side, northeast winds 15 to 20 knots, seas 3 to 4 feet. And the west side here, central coast, northeast winds 20 knots all the way down to the Bering Strait there, seas running as high as 8 feet here for the central coast. And for Tuesday, got brisk or small craft advisories here, strongest here on the eastern Arctic coast there, up to 30 knots with 9-foot seas, and then 7-foot seas, northeast 25 knots, all the way down again to the Bering Strait. For tonight, again, a lot of rain moves across Bristol Bay into Kodiak Island. Rain spreads over south central Alaska this evening and on up into the Susitna Valley. Big widespread area of rain right up into the central interior, mixing with snow at higher elevations up as you approach the Brooks Range and then on out to the Arctic coast there, but should stay dry over the Panhandle with all the showers ended. And then for tomorrow, showers start to increase here as this bulk of moisture moves into the Gulf of Alaska with some showers and rain along the North Gulf Coast. Rain to start the day with over south central Alaska becoming showery, but very wet conditions up over the central and northeast interior areas, drying out a little bit back to the northwest. A lot of showers there along the southwest coast. And then for Tuesday, we've got low pressure right over the Kenai Peninsula, so cloudy skies, numerous showers for south central Alaska, about the same for the Copper River Basin. Some partial clearing with mostly cloudy skies, scattered showers for the southeast coast there with this trough that'll increase as that trough approaches the coast late in the day. Pretty brisk, again, northeast winds all along the Arctic coast and the north slope with some rain and snow into the Brooks Range. Have a great evening.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.